be seated. Honored guests, our brethren from the Asean, the commandants of Coast Guards, and the directors of maritime law enforcement agencies from the Republic of Brunei, the Kingdom of Cambodia, the Republic of Indonesia, the People's Democratic Republic of Laos, the Republic of Malaysia, the Republic of the Union of Myanmar, the Republic of Singapore, the Kingdom of Thailand, the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes. Thank you all for your presence today and for your willingness to engage in meaningful discussions on the pivotal role of ASEAN Coast Guards in upholding the rule of law in our region's oceans. I thank as well the Philippine Coast Guard through Admiral Ronnie Gavan for this great privilege to address all of you this morning. We welcome you to our shores in the beautiful island of Samal, one of the thousands of islands that are integral parts of our archipelago. As you very well know, the Philippines is a maritime country bordered on all sides by the sea. As our president pointed out during the Shangri-La Dialogues in Singapore days ago, we have more seas than land. We have one of the world's longest coastlines, and we are the second largest archipelagic state in the world, next only to our ASEAN neighbor Indonesia. The blessings and sometimes curse of geography have placed the Philippines at the crossroads of the nautical highway that traverses the Pacific on our east and the South China Sea on our west. By this God-given geography, by culture and by choice, the Philippines and Filipinos are natural guardians of oceans in this part of the world. The protection of our seas is an existential issue for the Philippines. The sea is ever present in the day-to-day life of every Filipino. We depend on the oceans for food, energy, and even medicine. These waters constitute a nautical highway in which we transport our people and strengthen commerce across our islands. The sea is a natural buffer that protects us from geopolitical uncertainties that otherwise arise from shared land borders. Because of our inherent affinity to the oceans, many of our countrymen work even beyond our shores. They are the muscles and brains that run the world's largest commercial fleets and tourist vessels. Our sense of identity as a people is to a significant extent defined by our relationship with the waters that surround us. The centrality of the seas to our national identity and consciousness explains our unyielding commitment to seek order in the world's oceans by norms agreed upon by states that stand in sovereign equality. We therefore abide by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, the Constitution of the Oceans, and the common reference from which most of us, state parties within the ASEAN, including our neighbors big and small, define not only our rights and privileges, but also our duties to our seas. We abide by decisions based on the provisions on compulsory settlement of disputes under the Convention. We thus seek to align our national legislation with what those international rules provide. In the realization of our rights, we act with due regard to the rights of our neighbors and other states to the peaceful uses of the oceans. Adherence to international law is both a legal and a moral imperative for the Philippines. Foundational principles codified in the UNCLOS, such as protection of the marine environment, the right of coastal populations to enjoy its bounty, and their concomitant obligation to conserve and protect the marine environment, the exercise of freedom of navigation, and the peaceful means of settling disputes. All these have been embedded in Philippine constitutions, laws, and regulations long before our accession to the UNCLOS in 1982. After we acceded to the UNCLOS, we have aligned our baseline's law with its provisions. Subsequently, we have embarked on negotiations with our Asean neighbors for delimitation agreements. We envision these agreements to, among others, facilitate the effective enforcement of maritime laws and enable us to address cross-border crimes such as piracy, human trafficking, illicit trade in dangerous drugs, and harvesting of endangered species in our seas. I am pleased to report that we have successfully concluded some of these negotiations, and we remain steadfast in pursuing and concluding others with your governments. We are connected by our seas. So must we stand connected for our collective safety, security, and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, I am extremely thankful for this opportunity to address you, the men and women of the Coast Guards of ASEAN countries and of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. You are the primary guardians of our seas during peacetime. You ensure the enforcement within our region of international and domestic law for the promotion of the peaceful and lawful uses of the sea. It is your everyday patrolling of the seas, your consistent conduct of law enforcement activities, and aid to mariners in distress at sea that help realize the purposes of the Convention. Your enforcement of laws within your respective maritime jurisdictions provides the stability and security necessary for the development of the region, free from crime and illicit activities. Working hand in hand and building trust and cooperation the ASEAN way are indispensable if we are to successfully address many of our maritime challenges and threats. This forum is an effective means of sharing experiences and information in addressing traditional maritime challenges such as piracy, armed robbery, and smuggling in the seas. It is also critical in combating non-traditional maritime threats such as environmental degradation and the effects of climate change. Indeed, after only 3 years from its establishment, proposals for protocols of engagement among ASEAN Coast Guards at sea are already underway. Maintaining lines of communications between and among our Coast Guards ensures the lawfulness and effectiveness of the conduct of operations against elements that seek to destabilize our maritime domain. I note that our gathering today comes at the heels of 3 important regional developments that impact the security and stability of our respective maritime domains. First, and the most recent of these regional developments is the Shangri-La Dialogues in Singapore. There, our President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. strongly articulated our region's need for a rules-based international order and the global need for ensuring peace in the world's oceans, in particular in our shared seas in the Asean. Second, our gathering also comes shortly after the issuance by the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, or ITLOS, of its advisory opinion in ITLOS case number 31. In that opinion, the ITLOS affirmed that we, as state parties to the UNCLOS, have the due diligence obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment from climate change, that states have specific obligations to protect and preserve rare or fragile ecosystems, that we have to take measures necessary to conserve the living marine resources threatened by climate change, that we have a positive obligation to consult on measures to conserve marine resource stocks, and that it is our collective duty to control marine pollution. I believe that the ITLOS opinion, apart from clarifying states' obligation to protect the marine environment, has opened avenues for greater cooperation within our region to combat activities that harm our marine environment. It is my hope that through this forum, the ASEAN Coast Guards may formulate strategies and plans of action that specifically target issues arising from degradation of the marine environment. Third, and on a dimmer note, our gathering comes amidst the stern warnings of one of our powerful neighbors to enforce its own domestic law in its claimed maritime zones. It warns of arrest and imprisonment through mere administrative processes for citizens of our states who engage in lawful activities within those claimed zones. That declaration was made in disregard of the express prohibition under the UNCLOS against the imprisonment of those engaged in fishing in the EEZ. And notwithstanding the 2016 arbitral award, that categorically ruled that my country, the Philippines, is the coastal state with law enforcement jurisdiction over our own EEZ. Quite plainly, the threatened enforcement of that powerful state's regulations against peoples of smaller neighboring states appears to directly clash against international law, specifically against the textual and sacred obligations that we all acceded to under Article 73 of the UNCLOS. Those obligations prohibit, in the absence of agreements to the contrary by the states concerned, imprisonment and any other form of corporal punishment for those engaged in fisheries and other lawful uses of the oceans. Those obligations likewise require coastal states to promptly release arrested vessels and their crews upon the posting of a reasonable bond or other security. More fundamentally, the imprisonment of persons without a judicial trial for months runs counter to the principles of human rights at sea, which compel all states to accord basic human rights even for those arrested on account of activities purported to be not in accordance with a country's domestic law. More remarkably, these pronouncements were made by a state that was, by compulsory process under the UNCLOS, expressly declared not to be the coastal state for purposes of exercising rights, including law enforcement in the Philippine EEZ. The administrative issuance in question was made immediately after our own citizens protested that country's blocking of our fishermen from rich fishing grounds in our own EEZ. This has led our own president to declare that the enforcement of that foreign law against our citizens is unacceptable to the Philippines, and that our government and our Coast Guard stand ready to defend every square inch of our maritime domain and to protect our people against threats to their safety. Nonetheless, even in the face of the formidable challenges to the enforcement of our rights in our maritime domain, the Philippines will always seek peace in its relations with other countries. Peace and adherence to international law are values that are written large in the Philippine Constitution, where we have expressly renounced war as an instrument of national policy, adopted the general accepted principles of international law as part of our domestic law, and adhere to the policy of peace, equality, justice, freedom, cooperation, and amity with all nations. This policy of peace permeates our actions in all our country's domains. It is currently being tested even more so in our maritime domain. We respond to this test with an even stronger commitment to regional cooperation, deeper friendship, and enduring and lasting peace. ASEAN has historically been a stronghold for peace and stability for the region. ASEAN's approach to consensus building and mutual respect for each other's processes has effectively prevented serious conflicts in our region. It is my hope, in closing, that meaningful discussions in this forum among implementers and enforcers of the law of the sea will yield cooperative arrangements and other protocols that sufficiently address both traditional and emerging challenges to maritime law enforcement and help ensure that the peace and stability which the region has enjoyed for decades will continue to flourish. Thank you and a pleasant morning to all.